Would you like to be somebody who understands what Christianity's self-defense strategy has been and why it partially led to its own downfall? Then listen to this entire video where I explain how religion, or in this case Christianity, used a mechanism to keep it from dying to keep the threat of it crumbling at bay, let's say. Alright, so before we get into this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you'd like to learn more about self-development, dating, and how to reduce suffering in life. Let's get into it. Alright, so one sort of theory on why Christianity was created or the Bible was written was that, humans have existed for a long time. And you had different tribes that lived, in close vicinity in some cases, and there would be tension between one another because, this tribe had one god and this tribe had another god, and they had different beliefs and they were against each other, and, they'd have a war or something. But that's not very beneficial for one another, because you would, first of all, somebody would win probably, but then you've lost perhaps half of your armed forces, and, half of your tribe is dead then, and that's not really good. And you're not able to trade with the other tribe anymore, which would have been very beneficial to you, because as we know, markets and trading is great for sharing resources and benefiting from each other's expertise. One tribe would be good at harvesting crops, and the other one would be good at raising cattle, or being a shepherd, and one would have grain and the other one would have meat, and you could trade. And so what people start to figure out was, okay, we need to find a way that we can live in peace with one another. And they noticed that, okay, suffering is bad, so we need to reduce suffering, so let's try not to kill each other, because that creates suffering. So let's try and find a belief system that is universal, or not universal, but works for everybody. And we figured out these principles of trusting one another, of trading, of behaving altruistically, and that's beneficial. So let's make a set of principles which encourages this behavior to allow each other to thrive and live in peace. And that was, I would say, was how religion or Christianity was created, and how God was created. God was this set of principles with which you should follow, that enabled you to live in peace and harmony in a way that is good for you now and will be good for you in the long term, and the people around you also would benefit from that. Now, of course, so the Bible was written then, which explained these ways of life that can be good for you. And of course, the people who created the religion, or over time who created it, were thinking, okay, this is so valuable to us, we need to keep this religion alive because it offers so much value to us. So they wanted to ensure its survival. Now, one threat, well, you could go through the different threats that would endanger Christianity's survival, and one of them is the human itself, the believer itself. And because humans can question the religion and might deem it as wrong and insufficient, hence the religion created a system that aims to reduce the space available to question its validity. So it wanted to sort of not dumb down the human, but prevent it from overthrowing the religion because it thought it might not be good or might be insufficient. Now, I don't know if this is the reason why Christianity is designed, or in the past has been designed in this way, but I think the dogmatic side of religion explains this. So when you add dogma and a sacred narrative to religion, both of these concepts, the sacred nature and the dogma, lie beyond the reach of the human. So the human cannot come up with the idea to question it, because it starts to think, this is beyond me, this lies outside of me, it is what it is, and it's objectively true. And because humans develop this attitude then that they are not in the position of power to question it, they never question it. And even more, it would be best to set up like a punishment for questioning religion, which would reduce the probability of somebody criticizing it or questioning it. And I think I talked to a friend recently about Islam. Comes from an Islamic background, and she says that people get very offended if you start questioning their belief or the validity of Islam. And I think this has to do with it, that believers, not just Muslims, but generally strict believers, have been taught to not question their belief and not question the belief system that they are following, because it might threaten the belief system's existence. And then humans back in the day would have fallen into this group, these tribal groups that would then rub up against each other and create tension and hurt each other, and this keeping suffering at bay, and this peaceful mindset would it would perish, basically. Now, so people can get very easily offended when you question their religion and its validity, because they've been taught that evaluating the validity of their belief system is wrong. And I think this is generally a human tendency to not want to question your belief system, because I'll get to it in a second, but I think religion has encouraged this attitude. I think it has enabled religions to stay alive for a very long time, but that attitude of fundamentalism is dangerous and not aligned really with the complexity and the nature of reality. Because this rigidity of a belief system leaves no room for free thinking and the complexity of life. It reduces the complexity of the universe into a relatively basic, boxed-in reality, which is not what is real. That's not the truth of the reality, because it is far more complex than that. And of course, since we're beings with limited brain capacity and brain processing capacity, we can't interpret reality with 100% accuracy. And when we drift further and further away from the truth, we actually psychologically suffer because we dissociate from reality. And I've made 2 videos recently, which you can look at, on the sickness of the spirit, where I describe this dissociation. So one would need a belief system that actually leaves room for uncertainty and change. And of course, this is difficult because accepting that you might be wrong is existentially crushing. So humans have the proclivity to have a tenacious grip on their belief system because it reduces the anxiety-provoking complexity and harshness of reality. So if you threaten a belief system, you threaten their existence, essentially, because that is the way they interpret. It is like the way they think. It is, and if you take that away from them, they fall into chaos, into not understanding anything anymore. And then they have all the variables, all the complexity suddenly, boom, in their face, and that is just too much to handle, and it will make you go insane, literally. So humans aren't fond of that because they're primed to survive, and when their survival is in question, you pull out the fundamental foundation which they stand on and which makes their soul quiver, because it is existentially anxiety just like provoking, and it makes your soul shiver at its core, you know. So humans don't like to do that. And now if we bring this into the downfall of Christianity, I would say it's because as I've said before, that, you know, Catholicism developed to value truth above everything else, and of course Christianity involves a fair amount of dogmatic axioms which aren't backed by science. So humans thought, hold on, there's not much truth in this belief system, in this religion, so let's refute it, let's throw it out of the window. And if Christianity had been more open to change, to developing, to incorporating new ways of life, not new ways in life, but more optimal ways of life, like not stoning people because of certain crimes people have committed. I mean, that's like a sort of an oversimplistic example that people like to gravitate to when like bashing Christianity, but and I think this is what one can do today. Now we have this scientific outlook on life, this sort of aim for consciousness. We can actually look at Christianity from an external perspective and see, okay, there are a lot of principles in this religion that really do actually benefit humans and are based on thousands and thousands of years of trying to figure out how humans should live in a peaceful way and what's good for them, what is aligned with their like fundamental nature and their reality. And we have, of course, thrown that out of the window, and we don't really think about it or incorporate it or even consider it in like Western modern societies, let's say. Yeah, so, and I think the over rigidity led to its downfall to a degree. Yeah, and nowadays one should really communicate the utility of religion, not in a dogmatic, in a overly spiritual way, but like more with a scientific way. I mean, because that is what we're trying to do. We're trying to scientifically think or figure out what is good and what's bad. And a lot of people, like strictly religious people, they start talking about faith and they start talking about this. They use this vocabulary that a scientific person struggles to comprehend and vibrate with, let's say. So one needs to think with the mind of a modern person and scientifically figure out which principles we should like incorporate in our lives, I'd say. Yeah, so in conclusion, Christianity's self-defense strategy was to make sure humans or the believers were not able to question the validity of the religion and how useful or whether it was right or wrong, because that would threaten the existence. And the existence of the religion was so important because it kept suffering at bay to a degree. It enabled people to live in relative peace, let's say, and have a fairly structured, ethical life with a fair amount of reduced unnecessary suffering. But that over rigidity, because it was so dogmatic, let's say, led to the rational thinking Christian Western mind, scientifically thinking Western mind, to actually debunk it and deem it as invalid, which is dangerous because it does behold a lot of wisdom about human nature. Yeah. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you'd like to learn more about self-development, dating, and how to reduce suffering in life. Thank you for listening.